For 8 years, Gustav Klimt painted this grand allegory on one of the subjects that obsessed him and many other artists of his time. On the left side of the canvas, we see death, thin and draped in a shroud decorated with black crosses. It carries a club in its hand, and although it has no eyes, it seems to gaze at the dance of life with a macabre grin. Across a wide empty space on the right is life, crowded and chaotic. Here we see a group of intertwined bodies. Among them are men, women, children, and an elderly woman. Some sleep, others embrace, completely unaware of the figure watching them. But there is something deeply mysterious when we stay with this painting a little longer. Why does death smile? Why is there one woman in the group of life who is not sleeping like the others, but instead stares directly at the skeleton? And why, in this final version of the painting, did Klimt decide to replace the golden background seen in his earlier versions? This painting is called Death and Life. Klimt painted it between 1908 and 1915, and it is now held at the Leopold Museum in Vienna. Most people know Klimt for The Kiss, that image of two lovers wrapped in gold that has become one of the most reproduced images in the history of art. But the truth is that Klimt was much more than The Kiss. He was an artist deeply obsessed with the great questions of human existence, love, desire, death, and the passage of time. And Death and Life is, in his own words, the most important figurative work he ever painted. If we look carefully at the painting, the first thing we notice is the radical separation between the two sides of the canvas. On the left, death occupies its own space, it stands alone, and its dark robe is covered in crosses and circular shapes, symbols that in the Christian tradition point to the end of life. Its expression is a smile, though it is difficult to say whether that smile is threatening or simply inevitable. On the right, the bodies of life form a compact mass. They are wrapped in brightly colored fabrics, blues, pinks, and greens, decorated with flowers and shapes reminiscent of mosaic. Among them there is a baby, a couple, and an elderly woman. All of these figures represent the stages of human existence, layered one on top of the other, none of them appearing aware of what is watching them. And between the two groups there is an empty space, which is perhaps the most important element in the entire composition. What sets this work apart from other depictions of death in the history of art is the attitude of the living. In most medieval and Renaissance images on this subject, death generates terror. Figures flee, lament, or cling desperately to life. But here, exactly the opposite happens. The bodies on the right side do not simply ignore death. They appear completely at peace. They sleep, embrace, and hold one another, as if the proximity of death were not a threat, but simply a condition of existence. The museum that holds this painting notes that Klimt seems to be saying something very specific with this image, that death may take individuals one by one, but that life as a whole, as a chain of generations, will always remain beyond its reach. It is a surprisingly optimistic reading for an artist who had lost both his father and his brother, who watched his city crumble on the eve of the First World War, and who would die himself in 1918 from an influenza epidemic. Klimt's story is essential to understanding why this painting mattered so deeply to him. Klimt was born in Vienna in 1862 into a modest family. His father was a gold engraver, a detail that is not difficult to see reflected in the way Klimt would treat color and ornament throughout his entire career. He showed exceptional talent from childhood, and by the age of 14, he was already studying architectural painting at the Vienna School of Arts and Crafts. For years, he worked decorating public buildings, theaters, and staircases, becoming a respected and successful artist of his time. But then the tragedies came. In 1892, his father and his brother Ernst died within months of each other. Klimt was left alone, with the financial responsibility of supporting his mother and 4 of his 10 siblings, and with a very acute awareness that death could arrive at any moment and without warning. From that point on, Klimt became a completely different artist. His paintings grew much darker, more symbolic, and more personal. And within this period, we find Death and Life, one of his final masterpieces. But there is something about this painting that most people do not know. When Klimt first presented this work in 1911 at the International Art Exhibition in Rome, where it won first prize, the background was gold, the same gold that defined his most famous works from that period. But 4 years later, in 1915, Klimt returned to the painting and made a decision that no one has ever fully understood. He removed the gold and replaced it with a cold, neutral grey. That change must have meant something. Gold in Klimt's work had always been a symbol of eternity and immortal beauty, but by replacing it with grey, Klimt perhaps decided that this work should not be seen as something beautiful, but as something inevitable and tragic. And that was not the only change he made. In the final version, Klimt added several new figures to the group of life, and among them, there is one that stands out from all the rest. While every other figure sleeps with their eyes closed, there is a young woman on the left edge of the group, the closest to death, with her eyes wide open, her cheeks are flushed red, her hands are raised to her chest, and her gaze goes directly to the skeleton standing before her. We do not know with certainty what led Klimt to make these changes, but it is difficult not to connect them to the world surrounding him at that moment. Europe was at war, and that same year, his mother, with whom he had lived his entire life, died. Which makes us wonder about that young woman with her eyes open, the only one in the group who sees death coming. Could she be a representation of his mother? We will never know for certain, but I would love to read your interpretation in the comments. Finally, I want to show you this photo so you can get a sense of the scale of this work. Over 2 meters wide and 2 meters tall, making it one of those paintings you could stand in front of for hours, and the longer you look at it, the more mysterious it becomes. Thank you for watching the video until the end. As always, if you would like to have this painting in your personal collection, you can now purchase it directly from our catalogue. In the link in the description, you will find more than 900 carefully selected historical works so you can choose your favorites and begin your own art collection. Shipping is free worldwide, and by purchasing from the store, you will be supporting me enormously in continuing to create videos like this every week. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next video.